I'll try not to drop them today. Now, I'm reading from this translation, and this translation it says this: "Now these are the gifts Christ gave to the church, the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, and the pastors and teachers. Their responsibility is to equip God's people to do his work and to build up the church, the body of Christ. And this will continue until we all come to such unity in our faith and knowledge of God's Son that we will be mature in the Lord, measuring up to the full and complete standard of Christ." It's all about us becoming more like Jesus. That's what it's all about. Now that version, which is the New Living Translation, uses the word pastor there, but I think it's really helpful to point out that the word that is used there for pastor is essentially just the Greek word for shepherd. And this word pastor came from a Latin translation, and for some reason in that place, they kept it as pastor. And everywhere else they translate it as, or pretty much everywhere else, they translate it as shepherd. And we sometimes lose the sense of pastor just meaning shepherd because we change the word. And over the years, that word pastor has taken on the meaning as whoever it is who is leading a church. And and there are people whose name begins with pastor because they're leading the church. Now, we choose not to do that. We choose not to say Pastor Ben, Pastor Adam, Pastor Sanjay, Pastor Karina, because we actually believe that pastor is one of these gifts and roles which serves to build up the body of Christ and equip it to become mature in Christ. And that actually we have a team which has got more than just shepherdy, pastory gifts in it, and that's really important because we need all of them. So I am going to use the words pastor and shepherd entirely interchangeably because I don't think I can control it. But I'm always going to mean shepherd because that's the word that's there. So if I say pastor, I mean shepherd. So that's where I'm beginning. Now, we have begun every one of these. You'll know we've looked at apostle, we've looked at evangelist, we've looked at prophet right at the beginning, and every time we have tried to start by looking at Jesus, because remember, the point of these is that they're all there to help us grow into maturity in Christ. So we started by looking at Jesus because Jesus actually embodies every one of these gifts in different ways. So I get the great joy of being able to speak about Jesus, which is my favorite thing. So we're going to talk about Jesus the pastor, and just to make my point here, I have a picture of a shepherd. This is actually meant to be David. It's in a fantastic show called Tiny Fingers that we show on Pack 7. There you go, shameless advertising just there. But I want you to remember that we're talking about shepherd. Now, this is really easy because it is pretty obvious that Jesus stood up and said, "Hey, I am the good shepherd." So I thought that would be a good place to start. So let's just read this from John chapter 10. There's quite a lot of John chapter 10, and I could preach on it for 6 weeks. So I'm just going to do a little bit, and I'm not going to talk about all of it. Sorry about that. "I am the good shepherd," says Jesus. "The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. The wolf attacks the flock and scatters it, and the man runs away because he's a hired hand and he cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd," says Jesus. "I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay my life down for the sheep." We're the sheep, just in case you hadn't got that. Jesus is when it comes to us. All in. Like, just in case we'd forgotten that this morning, let's just stop and remember that when it comes to us, we belong to him. He knows our names, he knows our stories, and he is all in for us. He lays his life down for us. He doesn't feel ambivalently towards you. He doesn't look at you and think, oh, I don't know. He is all in for you. He lays down his life for his sheep because he chooses to. I think that's kind of cool. I read this week. I've had to do a lot of reading about pastor, and I'm going to admit that to you now. I've had to do a lot of reading because this is not my natural area, okay? I don't know, some of you will know this. This is not my natural space, being a pastor. There are loads of people in this church who are amazing pastors. But I am really comfortable in the space of learning stuff and then talking to you about it. And I'm really comfortable in the space of talking about Jesus. So that is the authority in which I'm standing here right now, not in being a pastor. I just wanted to make that really clear. So I've had to do a lot of reading, and I read this, and I thought this was very cool. A pastor, or a shepherd, knows people's names and knows their stories. That's the beginning. That's the beginning of what it takes to be a shepherd. Just like it says here, I know my sheep and my sheep know me. We are following in Jesus' footsteps when we learn people's names. And some people's names are more challenging because they're not the names that we grew up with. Some people's names are going to take a bit more work to try and pronounce properly or to try and remember. But we are following in Jesus' footsteps as a shepherd when we learn people's names and when we sit down and listen to their stories. Their good stories and their stories of difficulty. That is what it means to be a shepherd. And Jesus spent loads of time with people. And the one story that stands out to me when I thought about this was the story of the woman who has been bleeding for 12 years. Do you remember this story? There's a huge crowd around Jesus, and she just wants to be healed. And she's not allowed into the temple. She's not really allowed in normal society because of her bleeding. And she has lost all her money to doctors who haven't been able to help and have perhaps made things worse. And she is desperate, and she knows that if she can, oh, sorry, I just got a bit of hair in my face, that's not very helpful. She just knows that if she can touch Jesus' robe, if she can just touch the edge of where he is, that she will be healed. And she pushes through the crowd, and she does that, and Jesus knows instantly. Now, one of the bits I love about this story is that Jesus is not just about her healing. Because she's healed. He could have let her go away. He didn't need to stop and say, who was it who healed me? He didn't need to find her and say, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. He didn't need to do that because she was already physically healed. But he knew her story. He knew that her story was that she has been excluded for 12 years from society, excluded from worship for 12 years. He knew that she needs healing from more than what's happening in her body. She needs healing from the consequence of being an outsider for 12 years. She needed to know that she was a daughter. And he gave her that. Because it was about more than just that healing. Because he cared about who she was. He cared about her. He knew her story. He's interested in your story. He's interested in what's going on in your life. He's interested in the things that you're joyful about. He is interested in the things that are winding you up. He is interested in the things that make you sit in a doctor's waiting room and cry. He is interested in those things, whatever they are, because he is a shepherd, and he is your shepherd, and you are his sheep. I know my sheep. It's really interesting to think about sheep here. Like, why shepherd? Why sheep? What are chickens? I don't know. Why did Jesus choose that? Well, he chose it because it ties him into a story that has been told from when David was singing songs in the wilderness. But he also told this story because of what sheep are like. And most of us, not all of us, most of us have little concept of what sheep are like, I imagine. I've only encountered a sheep close up once, and that was when 100 of them had got into our garden overnight. I guess one did, and then all of the others just followed, because that's what sheep are like. And we woke up, and all you could see out the windows was sheep. It was quite something. It wasn't in Darley Abbey, it was when I was a child. That would be really weird, wouldn't it? Sheep are, by nature, weak, timid, a bit dim, slow, frightened, vulnerable, and defenseless. According to a book I read. I don't have personal experience with sheep. Sheep really, really, really need their shepherd. They can't get by without him. They're not going to be okay without him. The other thing that sheep are is really valuable. Most shepherds at this time kept sheep and goats. Goats, less valuable, better at defending themselves, less likely to die, slightly less stupid, apparently. Sheep need a lot of work, but they are valuable. And what Jesus chooses to have in his sheepfold is a lot of us who are hard work and vulnerable and defensive and not terribly good at looking after ourselves, but who he values, who are valuable to him because they are his sheep. Yeah? Cool. So all this starts with Psalm 23. So it would be weird not to go there. Because when Jesus said, I am the good shepherd, everybody who was listening went there because they knew it. The Lord's my shepherd. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. This is the job of a shepherd. Green pasture. Really, green pasture is super rare in that part of the world. I lived for 8 years in Cyprus, and you get green like for about, 4 weeks a year. Like, there's no rain, and then there's rain, and then it's green, and then there's no rain again. So green pasture is pretty difficult to find, and it's pretty rare. So when God says that he brings us and he makes us lie down in green pastures, what we know is that is saying that he makes us safe and that he provides for us in a way that is supernatural and beyond the way that the world can provide for us. He wants to provide for us. And we see that Jesus gathers a whole load of people in a green place in the feeding of the 5,000, and he takes what could not possibly provide for them and he makes it provide for them when he feeds 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. He is more than capable of providing for us. And what's really interesting about a shepherd, and that you don't get with chickens, which you can keep in a safe place in your backyard and just bring the food to them and feed them, is that you get this tension between provision and protection, because the protection is in the village where there is a nice, safe sheep pen that the shepherd can lie in front of and keep safe all night. But the provision is out on the hills. And the provision, to get to the provision, it's going to take you through difficult places. That there's going to be a journey, that it's going to involve movement. And the shepherd is going to be continually caring for you and challenging you, because he's got to take you from the place where you feel so totally safe to the place where there's something for you to eat. And then he's got to take you back again. And then he's got to do it again. And then he's got to do it again. And then he's got to do it again. And there'll be times when sheep wander off the path and they get themselves into trouble and they get themselves stuck in a thicket, or something in their environment damages them, and they are going to need compassion and they are going to need healing, and that is part of the work of a shepherd, to patch these sheep up, because all that the shepherd cares about is the sheep. That is his whole job, or her whole job, is the sheep. Everything else is just add-ons. It is about people. And shepherds are people who are all about people. And they are all about people flourishing. And that is sometimes going to take care, and it is sometimes going to take compassion, and it is sometimes going to take challenge, and it is sometimes going to need healing. But all those things are about the well-being and the flourishing of the people. And the reason that we have people who are called to be shepherds is that Jesus is a shepherd. Jesus is all in to his relationship with you. Jesus is all about you, the people. Jesus is all about people and people flourishing. And that is individual people and people in community. You know, there is a reason why we keep coming back to this thing where we keep saying, you know, it'd be great to be in a community. And it isn't because, like, you know, it isn't because there's a metric somewhere that says, you know, when we've got this percentage of people in communities in our church, then we're winning. It's not about that. It's about this. It's about the fact that people flourish better when they're part of a community. And that's why coming home has been so important to us. That's why community is so important to us, because Jesus is all about people flourishing. And that is what matters. His whole job is the well-being of his sheep. So, the shepherd pastor gift is all about this. It's all about wanting to see people walk free. It's about wanting to see people be healed. It's want to see people be well fed, be safe, be growing, and be experiencing joy in their relationship with Jesus. That's what it's about. See people living life in all its fullness. And it's not like there are strong sheep and there are weak sheep. It's not like there are just a few sheep that need a shepherd. You know, there are just some sheep that are extra hurt or extra broken or extra damaged, and they need a pastor, they need a shepherd, they need pastoral care. No, this is a sheep flock-wide job. Because if we think we don't need that, we are kidding ourselves. If we think we don't need Jesus shepherding us, we are in a bad place. Because we're all sheep. Even the shepherds are sheep. That's kind of weird, isn't it? But, you know, it's true. And we will all make mistakes. We will all wander off. We are all vulnerable to wolves. And we are none of us capable of finding that green pasture without a shepherd. And we will all sometimes walk through a terrifying time that in the psalmist calls a valley. Sooner or later, there will be something which will be a valley. And at that point, this is what we get. Jesus with us. And whatever kind of trouble or difficulty you walk through, Jesus walks with you. He walks next to you. Sometimes when we talk to our friends who aren't Christians about Jesus, what we kind of want to talk about is like, well, it means you're going to go to heaven and be with Jesus when you die. And if we say that, then we are missing out on the most amazing, most wonderful thing about following Jesus, is that we get to be with him now while we live. While we live, while we walk, while we face the uncertainty of how we're going to pay the bills, or while we face bereavement, or while we face illness, or while we face the struggle of being away from our families. Whatever the struggle is that you're facing, Jesus wants to walk in that with you. And walking in that with you means being there in your joy and being there in your lament, being there in your sadness. I've loved having people who have walked with me through storms. And I was just thinking this week, I have really appreciated that I have a little WhatsApp group of other people who have children who are autistic or who would describe themselves as being on the spectrum. And those people, all they do is sometimes say, oh yeah, that must be really hard, that thing of trying to get the school to give your child what they need, that's really hard. And actually, them saying, I understand, I've been there, I'm standing with you, that feels like this. Someone who will just say, oh, I'm with you, I care that that's happening, and I'm standing with you in it. They can't do anything to fix it, but they can make me feel like I'm not alone. They're shepherds when they do that. Okay. Oh dear, I'm supposed to have finished by now. Sorry, Sanj. So, here you go. Here's the question. I'll speed up. Here's the question. Are you a pastor? If you are, that's great. I want to honour all of you who are pastors, all of you who work in the National Health Service and look after people, all of you who work in social care, all of you who volunteer in places where you just listen, all of you who work, I wrote a list, it's really long, I won't say it all. I've lost the list, Esther. Okay, I wrote down people who work with refugees, people who are working in CR, people who work in schools, people who are working with Talk It Over, with Restore, with Upbeat, in counselling, in therapy, helping people get out of debt, and so many more. You are being Jesus. You are bringing Jesus' shepherd's heart into the world when you care for people, because Jesus was all about people. Are you a pastor? Now, I'm not a pastor. I'm not even massively gifted in this pastoral thing. I care about people, and I'm not very good at past that. So I thought this is really great. I can write a book, because what I have learned through this series is that saying, well, it's not really on my gift, I'm actually a teacher, that is not an out. Okay, saying that I'm a teacher doesn't mean that I don't have to talk to my friends about Jesus. Okay, saying I'm a teacher doesn't mean that I have to learn how to hear God's voice. Saying I'm a teacher doesn't mean that I don't have to make an effort to get to know people who are from a different culture to mine. Okay, it's not an out. So saying I'm a teacher is not an out for being a pastor. So I thought I could write a book. It's going to be called Pastoring for People Who Aren't Pastors. Or possibly it's going to be called Shepherding for Dummies. And I thought in my book I could talk about what you need to do. I could talk about what that looks like for an ordinary person like me who's got no idea. And maybe it would talk about what the result would be if I did that. So I was all ready to write the book, and then I realized Jesus already wrote it. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, that's how you love one another. By this, everyone will know that you're my disciples. if you love one another. And if I've learned anything about the love of God, is that it's always an action, not just a fluffy feeling. It means doing stuff. And so, from what I heard when I was reading what Jesus said, and what it said in Psalm 23, which is what Jesus was like hooking back into when he said it, these are the things I've come up with as my Duffer's Guide. So, I read once that when birds flock like this, in those fancy patterns, that the only reason they can do it is because each bird is somehow aware of the 7 birds that are near to them. So they're not aware of the whole flock, but they can move in unity because they are aware of the 7. Every one of them is aware of the people who are near to them. So building on that, in my Duffer's Guide to Pastoring for Non-Pastors, I'm going to say everything I'm going to say now applies to the people who are near you. Know their names. Know their stories. Maybe learn how to listen. Look out for them. Keep an eye on them. Care. And walk with them. And sometimes walk with them. I thought of this today. We were singing My Lighthouse. And we sang that song, You Will Lead Me Through the Storm. And I remember singing that song when I was in a storm. And today I sang it and I wasn't in a storm. But I sang it for everybody who is in a storm. Because I remember singing that song when I was in the middle of a storm. And I remember feeling everybody around me singing, You will lead me through this storm. And I remember not feeling alone. Because all of you were singing that when I was in my storm. So today I sang that for those of you who are in a storm. And that is being a shepherd. 101, Shepherds for Dummies. Sanjay's up next week. He'll tell you what being a shepherd really is. But this is my, guide for idiots and non-shepherds. So, okay, now I'm landing, Sanjay. Does that make you feel better? Okay. So, I don't know what God's been speaking to you about today, but I think there are 4 things that he might have been speaking to you about, and if he has, I want you to respond to him. And these are the things. Maybe you're feeling like you're not a pastor, you're not a shepherd, but you want to learn how to be a shepherd for some people near you. And that's really important because of any of these roles, I think the one where we need all of us to be a part of it is this one. There is so much hurt and brokenness in our world that if we need a pastoral team, we actually need it to be as big as all of us.